I'm Amir Farjoon, coordinator for Art Science Connect. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
We're a CUNY Graduate Center-based center, bringing scientists and artists and interdisciplinary scholars together for public conversation and innovative programs that encourage and host forward-looking collaborations in the intersection of art and sciences. Today, we're very pleased to launch a new program, Innovation Sound Technology, IST, with Kathrin Hunze and Rob Hamilton. This is the first installment of a series that's planned by our Art Science Connect fellows, Tobias Vandel and Itza Garcia. Hi. They also have another event planned, which they will let you know about soon. If you are in New York, please join us for a conversation between artist Chloe Bass and the writer Hannah Zeyavi. They'll talk about AI, care, and art on Monday at 6 p.m. at the Graduate Center on 34th Street and 5th. We have a reception at 5:30, so you're welcome to that too. And before I hand out the mic, I want to thank our supporters, the James Family Charitable Foundation and the Al Held Foundation. And now I will hand the mic. I will paste links for the next events on the chat. I'll hand the mic to Itza and Tobias. Thanks.
Thank you, Amir.
Thank you, Amir. Hello, everyone who's joining us. We are very excited to start this series. Innovation Sound Technology is actually the continuation of a previous project, actually very successful one by a colleague of ours, Jacob Sachs-Michelini, that was called Algorithmic Sound Series. We are both students at the Graduate Center in the PhD program in composition, and after Jake graduated, he very kindly invited us to continue with his project of bringing technology and music into contact with several types of events. And we generated Innovation Sound Technology as a way to continue with this objective. And we are very happy to introduce Kathrin Hunze and Rob Hamilton, two artists who use sound and technology in very innovative ways. So I will just now give the podium to Toby, and he can present our guests.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Hello, Kathrin. Hello, Rob. Kathrin Hunze, our first presenter today. Kathrin Hunze studied communication design at the Hamburg University of Applied Science, is a graduate and a master student of the Art and Media program at the University of the Arts in Berlin. She's board member of the Media Arts Association Berlin and member of the collectives KateHack and Raumperspektive. Lecturer for the departments of Art and Media, Fashion Design at the Berlin University of the Arts and the Hamburg University of Applied Science. Her work have been presented at the Ars Electronica, Centre Pompidou and West Bund Museum. She lives and works in Berlin. Hello, Kathrin. So nice to have you here. So I got into your artworks on Instagram, was just following you and just inspired by so many things you're doing. And yeah, it's exciting to hear more about that from you. And yeah, welcome. And I give you the podium now and looking forward to see you.
Okay, hello everyone. So I will start now with sharing the screen and share sound and everything. Oh, again asking for the right. Oh, sorry. Asking. So I hope you can see everything. Good. So yeah, I show you some artistic research projects today, and they are actually the base where I still working on, and they are the base also for my whole projects which have done so far. So, and yeah, so I will start now with the layer, and maybe I go quick in this kind of mode. Oh no, it's not doing, oh yeah, it's doing that. So what you see here is my first project, and it is, oh, sorry, I moved a bit too far. It's called System in a System. So, and this is, I will really quickly explain that. So maybe later we can send around an abstract about that, because it's, you see that it's a really long project. And so what I have done here is I created a visual code system based on the genetic code. And so I used the mechanism of transcription and translation of the biochemical reactions to create a code system on its own, and sonificate that. So this was more or less my first steps into sonification and sound. And yeah, so I created out of that a video work, a 3-channel video work, where you can see the processes of transcription and translation. So, and this is also the translation part. So in the first part, I created the science system based on the chemical things, chemical science. And then I used the translation process inspired by this biology translation process as a modulation tool for the sound. So I did this in the earliest in Ableton everything, because it's, maybe you know that from Ableton, if you know Ableton, that you easily can build this kind of visual partitures, yeah. So, and I created also a sign system, because there were some little programs about the sign itself, because they get it doubled. And so I created more and more rules. So it's getting more into an algorithm. And I was not coding in that time. So for me, it was everything. This is the base, how it started, how my interest in coding and data started yet. Yeah. And so I translated that into installation. So I put everything on wood by hand, and yeah, and make an audio or sound installation out of that. But I also did this 3-channel installation, where I show you really, really quick how it works. And maybe later, so the sound is not so loud, so it's really, you can't hear less, but maybe later you can hear more. I sent the link into the chat later. So what you see here are the 3. The first is the transcription process. Then you see the translation process. And then in the 3rd channel, you see the whole processes together, and they're creating sound. Yeah, really abstract, maybe a bit housey. So yeah, there were some mapping issues. Okay, so, and then it was not enough for me. So I thought there must be something more. And then I finished my studies in Hamburg, and this was my BA work. And I moved to Berlin and studied art and media. So, and go to the generative class by Professor Alberto De Campo. And he gave me the first steps into Super Collider. And he gave me a little snippet about from Julian Rohrhuber, who's also a genius in Super Collider. And yeah, and we started to create an whole system, how we can do a real-time synthesizer with genetic data. So what you see here, so I did it again with the algae. It's called Talissia. It has another name as well, but it's okay for now. So, and so this is, I did the, yeah, by the way, I did the whole project together also with a physicist. He was my scientific backup, and we have big discussions because I also have to learn this science thinking and bring it into the art or design. And so it is Thomas Hack, and we're working now over 10 years together, and also on this kind of project with genetic data. Yeah. So, and I think for people, they are not into this kind of super collider thing, I prepared something what you can hear directly, because we created then later a genetic synthesizer where I can modulate some sounds. And I will show you quick an example about that. So you can put here some, it doesn't matter which kind of data. So actually you can put all A, C, G, and T, you can put them inside here or write in directly, and you can create a sound. So you can, maybe you hear that now. Let's see. It's not working. Oh, there's the other one. Oopsie. Oopsie, oopsie. Oh, it's crashing now. I knew it. The other one. Oh no, no, no. So now you see it's done its perfect thing. But anyway, so maybe I will move forward. So in that time it's starting again. So now you can hear a bit, but now it's starting. Yeah, it's a little delay. So, and you can hear if I choose, I also can save some genetic data, and you can hear something here. Yeah. So based on that, I created a lot of sounds, also could use field recordings, bring them into and modulate them through this 4 letter. Yeah. Okay, so then I will quickly move to another project. Oopsie. So it's Super Collider. It has its own way of thinking. So, and now we move on to the, na komm schon. So, here we are. Okay, and yeah, so this was the first project where I started coming more into sonification. And this is my toolbox now. So what I'm using also for other projects to creating sounds, and I work more complex also with granular synthesis now with sound. So in also what I started in the art and media studies, I started working because all this is really, these are systems, also a really lively system based on the genetic code, what's really fascinating me. So, and I love the idea of play around with systems. We are creating, manipulating system. This is also coming through to power structures and how we control data and also human beings in one kind, yeah. So I started with the Singularis project in between the other, because this was really coming together in one point, and started with 3D scanning. So, and created based in Unity a system what involves real-time point cloud data. They are audio, visual, and reacting in real time. and also manipulate mesh objects, 3D objects, what you see here. So what you see, the first thing what I started is with point clouds. And I used, I'm not a developer, but I used different kind of techniques, what in this time, so it sounds so, yeah, it's not a long time ago, but in this time, it was really, many people were hiding informations about this, how to bring them more point clouds and all this kind of stuff. So, and, but there are some, like from Unity, Kejiro Takahashi, he is really a good lecturer, what this kind of stuff is. And he gives some basic inputs, how to bring point clouds alive and make them audio visual. So what you see here are really 3D scannings, and they are full in the Singularis performance. And I also created a video about that. We will have later a quick look into it through different kind of steps. So what I created here and is really an audiovisual performance system, but also a system where I'm creating a lot of video. So basically, I'm not using After Effects anymore or all the stuff. I have everything, my whole CI system here. So I also worked in this time on the glass shader. This is something where you see all the shininess. Now it's totally normal. But also this, what I'm working on is also deforming and real time. So make this mesh objects working audio visual reacted, yeah. So here are some examples, also playing with textures and really destroying the objects, yeah. So here's some other examples. So maybe you want to see something. So how it looks inside the Unity project. I didn't open up because I have a new computer. It's a mess with the new Apple thing. But I got another thing to, oh no, it's crashed. I knew it. Okay. I will, sorry. So I will quickly start that again. It's a bit picky today, Unity. Okay, so while it's starting, I can switch to the video of Singularis. So there are two versions, actually 3 versions and older versions. So I worked really on this 50, 60, 70, kind of 80, 90, visual effects. And also you have to keep in mind, this kind of glass effect is working really easy if you have a GPU. So now you have really nice computers, but in this time my Mac was not able. So, and I only have the money for a Mac. So, and I don't want to buy a Windows computer. And then I got the NVIDIA card, an external thing. And then, yeah, it was a complex structure to bring this alive. Yeah. And yeah, to save also power, because some things are not really, they have delayed, it was overloading the GPU. I crashed one because I really pushed the boundaries of the graphic cards. I really want to know it in these times. So, but you can find, you see, if you are really into this world and you're creating a lot of special effects and they're working so many layers, so you want to see more, yeah? So I put this also into the chat later so that you can have a little...
I think we can watch a minute. That would be amazing. Let's just watch a minute of the video. I really like it. It's a very wonderful work.
Tobias?
Yeah.
What did you say? I didn't hear you.
Sorry, why don't we watch a minute of the video? It's just such a wonderful work.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, fine. I thought I would, I'm running out of time, so sorry. So, yeah, of course.
Great, great.
So let's start here, maybe.
3932 108466 35876 19590 128056. Total pass fail 0 fail 1 refine patch 166.165.221.884.711.950.178.1153. Filter. Outside. Main body. Gain of /var 0.743287.4044178. 109,437 to 108,339 98.9967% 0 seconds. Filter exact. 108,339 to 82,028 75.7142% 0 seconds. Filter neighbor, 82,028 to 45,061 54.9337% 0 seconds. Filter groups, 20. 45,061 to 30,961 68.7091% 0 seconds. Status 00000000000. Expanding patches. Refine patch BFGS failed. Refine patch FGS failed. Expansion 21 seconds. Total pass fail 0 fail 1 refine patch 171630 75321 33177 63132 138453. Total pass fail 0 fail 1 refine patch 143.88579.3305360.7838880.6695. Filter. Outside. Main.
I will jump a bit so that you can see the other
Computer
point clouds.
The denser the spread, and the more potential the thinner it is. What we call real and also perceive and experience in this way are those places, those curvatures or bulges in which the particles are densely scattered and the potentialities are realized. Phase transformation. Deformations in the intermediate area. You can shear a granular system at different speeds without changing the applied voltages. Such a system is also called perfectly plastic. Dissipation and symmetry. Oculus compositus. Quotation marks below, we, quotation marks above, are a node of possibilities, which realizes itself the more densely it wraps the possibilities busing in itself and around it. Solution for granular entropy. Body dissolving projects. Dilatancy. A pile of granular grains will form an unmanageable number of contacts under mechanical stress, whereby chains of force are formed which transport the information of the transfer of force through the body. Mesocosmos. Body dissolving projects. Apparatuses for realizing interhuman and extrahuman possibilities.
Okay, so I hope it wasn't not too short now. So
just a very amazing work. I really recommend watching the full experience and also not to miss sound and the voice. And it's, yeah, thank you for sharing that.
So maybe I do that directly. So where I can, there's a chat. I put that here inside, so you can have that. So
thank you.
okay. So and so now I can show you directly how it works. So this is really the new version in Unity. This work is not really working fine. I excuse for that, but I'm still working on that to bring this horse running. So, and because you have to change everything because of the new system of this M1 Apple thing. So what I want to show you now, and I hope it's not killing. Yeah, okay, perfect. So this is how it looks now. So if I go a bit into that, this is a lively point cloud. And now what I developed now is put videos on that. So if you look, there are a lot of AI videos on that now. So if so it's not working. Okay. Oh, okay, it's not working. Yeah, so normally it should work a bit. Now it's coming. So I have to turn it on. Oh no, it's not coming. Now, yeah, anyway, good. So it has a little problems here going on, but this is how the world looks. And then in the performance mode for this performance, there's something, I think it's a delay because of the Zoom thing. So this is some preview for performance, what I will do in 2 weeks. So where I work now with noise as well. And this is how it looks now, and it's also implementing it's getting, I think it's really, so now I have noise, it's coming, everything delayed. So, and yeah, so I just want to show you how it looks in this kind of world, because you always see the finished project. And yeah, so here's my point cloud. And if you're really interested to go deep into that, I really can recommend to go to Kujiro Takahashi. He's made the basics of that also for newer systems. And it's a really great way to work and to learn and work with point clouds if you want to work with that.
Great. One little question. So you said you have the point cloud, and on those points are now external video files playing in the 3D space.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So this
and
is something
live animated in Unity.
Exactly.
So that's the environment. Okay.
So you see that maybe now here you see there are some experiments of with stable diffusion, and I put this video on the point cloud. This is what I have for a long time, but I never worked for that. So I have this toolbox now, and now I'm taking, now it's interesting to work with the point clouds and maybe combining that with an AI. So maybe it's getting to another research project now. But yeah, exactly. So this is possible also to create an image, a new image out of the point cloud and showing just one video. So this is something what I'm working on, and yeah, maybe for the next performance, if it's work. So, but here in the delay Zoom world, it's not working very fine. So I'm sorry for that. Yeah. So, and I turned that off because my, it's really sad, but it's not working really. It's okay. I turn off Unity now.
I think it just takes too much computing power to Zoom together.
Even with the new expensive Mac. So shame on Apple for that.
Yeah.
So I expect.
I mean, you're doing really cutting edge projects, so that should be like that.
Yeah. So, and what I want to show you, so close to the end now, is maybe I send the link later for that as well. So I also working on this audiovisual side, and also what I show now is a series. It's called DataMe. So where I worked also with motion tracking and motion capturing, and so there DataMe is a series what started with DataMe DataFed. It's a interactive video sculpture, and I can't show that now because not so far with this computer, but it's a data-fed sculpture, what you see here, and it's reacting. So it's an app what's installed on a tablet. So if you turn on the app and you just see the lively image, you have to interact with this the sculpture, because otherwise it's calling you. It's a bit like a system of a Tamagotchi. So it's calling you data me, something like this. So I also started playing a bit with irony of technologies, because sometimes I think it's too serious, I would say, and reflecting things and criticize technology with irony is much more better and makes more fun. So, and then the second part, I did this in a residency in Austria with Paraflows. And I created DataMe Data Sugar. This is a real video work, and I put here in the newer version of the installation a lot of Haribo I don't know if you know that, but I'm pretty sure you know Haribo, this kind of stuff. I know this from my grandparents. Everyone knows that. Everyone loves that. So, and this installation was really interesting because I said that the people, I put a little sign here and I said, so it's, I'm not, I don't care if you eat that. I'm not, what you say, yeah, if you're feeling sick after that, so I'm not taking
Like,
responsibility for that.
Like a disclaimer that it's data sugar must not be healthy, something like that.
Yeah, it's about addiction, about this, like Instagram, and we are really feeding each other. So, and feeding a lot of infos, and it's sometimes also depressing if you see a lot of works and you say, oh, wow, that's so nice, no? And yeah, so, and the interesting part was, it was in the beginning, it was 20 kilos Haribo. In 1 week, the visitors eat from the installation, and they eat in 1 week 5 kilos. So, so it was really interesting, this kind of interaction with this kind of bringing real Haribo to it, and the people were sitting there and eating and looking the video. So,
Very
and then
engaging,
yeah. So, and then that's why it's a series. So I worked also with augmented reality and also questioned the idea of augmented reality, and thinking here in the data toy 1 about the idea of a daily life of an augmented reality sculpture. So I go through Berlin and look some areas where where sculpture and AR sculpture could live. So, and what kind of work could a data sculpture could do? So, and I named it in the end data toy. So, because it's also collecting data, and yeah, so it's a short photo series about an augmented reality app. So I turned around and bring it to a 2D area. So, and then I have the data horse. So what you see in general, what I want to say, these are all things what I based on my artistic research project, how to work with digital materials, and also the tools what I created. So you can see all this kind of manipulating surfaces and all the stuff, they are all inside, and I always choosing something. It's a bit like Haribo, taking something and work with that. Yeah. And yeah, so and maybe I show now in the end some 2 different kind of projects if I'm not running out of time.
Slowly, but we should still have a look at this and then slowly move forward.
You saw that too, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is maybe this, and the other one, maybe I show you quick, is the this is the ability to execute, and this is training your best friend a character test. They're both acting with AI, machine learning, stable diffusion, and all this kind of stuff. So maybe this will be the next artistic research project, because AI and maybe more machine learning, I have to say it's another kind of working and thinking about that. And I started with a project about a tank, and about the idea how we work with robots and machine learning, or AI, I would say, and the idea that we are projecting our behavior to the robot. So, and I choose the tank because the tank is a really provocant object, and actually now, I have to say, in that time, it was in between the first lockdown in Corona, so it was a bit also heavy to film outside, but also but no one was interested about the tank itself. Now it's a bit different. Yeah, it's really interesting how the tank's popping up now. So because the tank has a really different kind of role. So it's I really did big research about what kind of role because they are pink tanks, yeah, outside, also about revolutions, for example, China, and all the stuff. If you look into this history, it's really interesting to see what kind of role in social behaviors the tank are playing. It's not only a destroying machine, yeah. But in the comics, so you see there are many layers, and I can't tell you hours about this project, but it was more interesting how we teach and how we live with a robot together, especially if we have a working machine like a working dog here. So I tried to make this little tank a bit more nicer, to create also based on the idea how to train an AI model. And everyone loves little dogs. So this was the first part where I thought, okay, we do a little dog out of the tank, so maybe then it's better socialized. So what I did, I go training with Leo. You see that here. And also create an association, because in Germany, everyone loves to create associations now. And maybe 4 years ago, many years ago. And this could be also sometimes a bit critical. So you see, again, many, many layers coming together based on this whole project, how we humans acting with new technology and old technology together. So I show you now a quick input about that.
Ausdauer, Mut und Härte machten ihn zu einem vielseitig verwendbaren Gebrauchshund.
Der Verein für deutsche elektronische Schäferhunde stellt deshalb als Hauptforderung an seine Züchter: Der deutsche elektronische Schäferhund muss auch weiterhin als Gebrauchshund gezüchtet und gehalten werden.
Your best friend.
So make a quick stop. So what you saw before were the Minister of Defense, and what I forgot to say, that my idea was the best trained dog is the German Shepherd dog. So feed this little dog with the German Shepherd dog, so you have no problems with this dog. So this was the main idea. And also they have an history combination, because German Shepherd dogs were in the Second World War, and I think in the first as well, trained to be eat under a tank, and then in the war itself they have bombs on it, yeah, on their bodies, yeah. So I also make my own lesson for this. I now have a tank driver lessons. So, and yeah, Tobias, sorry.
So many dimensions to this. And I would like, could you drop the link also to the chat, that we can watch it in full? And I think there's a lot to digest, also the social dimensions of that work. And as you said, like the current news focus on it. Yeah. It's a very strong, also ironic work. Yeah. Wow, fantastic.
Yeah,
I
think
thank you,
that's
Kathrin.
it. Now, I hope it was not too much. But
it was not enough, but we can still engage with your work. But unfortunately, we need to continue now with our next guest, and we still have you here for some questions and talk. So that's great. Thanks very much. That was very inspiring.
I was almost in the end, and I want to say thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
So
get done.
Get done now. So
get done. And where's the tank dog now?
The tank dog is right next to me. So it's in the background because it's
as it should
traveling
be, right?
now. The tank dog is now traveling now to Dresden.
I see.
Please, everyone, remember that you can also send your questions to the Q&A box, and please do, because not every day you can like look under the hood of so many projects and have real-time testing. And thank you so much, Kathrin, for showing so many wonderful
Thank you.
Look, we look forward to your questions and comments.
So then welcome to Rob Hamilton. Hi, Rob. Great to see you. And
Hello, hello.
hello. So Rob Hamilton is composer and researcher. He explores the converging spaces between sound, music, and interaction. His creative practice includes extended reality performance works built within fully rendered networked game environments, procedural music engines, and mobile musical ecosystems. His research focuses on the cognitive implications of sonified musical gestures and motion, and the role of perceived space in the creation and enjoyment of sound and music. Dr. Hamilton received his PhD from Stanford University's Center for Computer Music Research and Acoustics, CCRMA, and currently serves as Associate Professor of Music and Media in the Department of Arts at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York, upstate New York. Hi, Rob. Maybe Itza can introduce a few words on how you came up.
Encountered the work of Rob. Thank you so much, Rob, for being here. As Tobias said, I'm very interested in instruments, instrumentation, new developed instruments. And actually, the way that I got to know Rob's work was because there was this paper written about extended music in music in extended realities that compiled around 40 or maybe more works, projects that worked with music in VR, augmented reality, augmented virtuality. And I mean, I learned so much with reading that one single paper, and I'm very happy that I encountered it and that I encountered Rob's work as well. So Rob, I will give the podium to you, and thank you very much for sharing your work.
Great. Thank you, Itza and Tobias, for having me. Thank you, Kathrin. That was a great talk. There's a lot of really interesting overlaps I think we'll have some time to talk about afterwards. Let me share my things. I believe you guys should be able to see that now. Great. And let's see. Okay. So today I'm going to do actually almost a bit of a retrospective in that I started working in designing and developing musical systems having to do with and based in game engines and virtual simulation spaces, starting back in around 2005 at this point, which is terrifying to think about. When you start looking at those numbers. And so where we're going to end up today is where I am today, the kind of projects I'm working on, using music, building virtual instruments in the Unreal Engine, for instance. But to get there, in order to get to that place, there's a lot of interesting ground that I'd like to cover. I think it's interesting, and kind of it informs kind of the reasons why I ended up where I am, and so I'll jump into that, and we'll see how this goes. Let's see. So when I talk about a lot of my artwork, which is music based, but is also essentially 100% living in a technology space. I'm a composer and performing musician by trade, but also equally a software engineer and developer. I worked in a number of industries in that area, as well as pursuing it academically. So my practice has always been very grounded in this space where technology informs music and music informs technology in ways that are idiomatic, hopefully, to both paradigms. And interestingly enough, for this long period of time, this I want to say 18 years now, my practice has really been informed by one thing and one thing more than others, and fundamentally that's gaming, which is kind of interesting. And so I grew up as a video game player as a child, and continue to be so today. This is me playing Overwatch. And there's something about these games, right? They're fast-paced, they're collaborative, there's communication, there's a high level of graphic rendering and audio rendering, spatialization, all battle tested across thousands and thousands of users and millions of person hours, so to speak. So this is the world in which I started being really interested in building artworks and musical interactive works for live performance. And so today I'll start off with a piece that I guess we're going from the sublime of Kathrin's work to the ridiculousness of some of mine. This is a piece that I wrote for the laptop orchestra at Stanford. In this time, around the mid-2000s, I was hacking the Quake 3 gaming engine, which was this, incredibly popular video game where you ran around shooting zombies and other players, and kind of this idea of how do we turn swords into plowshares and build art out of kind of these murderous games. And so I built this system for the Stanford Laptop Orchestra in this piece called Nous sommes tous Fernando, pairing the Quake 3 engine, which I hacked open sound control data inputs and outputs into, with the Chuck programming language, and with the use of some multi-channel hemispherical speakers scattered around the live performance space and the built-in networking of a game engine, you end up with something that looks a little like this. So in this case, the projectiles being launched by each performer are being sonified in real time based on the coordinate locations of their collisions with the virtual world. And those sounds are being spatialized around a concert hall to these hemispherical speakers, which you can see there are avatars standing on a virtual representation of one now. So this idea of marrying physical and virtual spaces was something that I was very interested in back at this point. How do we overlay a virtual space into a physical space, musically, spatially, cognitively? And so moving forward just a few years, a research project that I was asked to join at Stanford was kind of joint done with what was called the Stanford Humanities Lab, which was run by Jeffrey Schnapp, who's now at Harvard, and the computer science department, as well as the Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics, where I was based. The idea was to build musical works or build interactive works for a new virtual game engine or virtual space engine, as it were, called Siricata, which was a research project at Stanford. And in order to explore this, we committed to a series of concerts at the Milano Torino Festival in Italy, a large art and music festival. And so for an evening length concert, we built a series of works in this new engine, and one of which was a version of Terry Riley's seminal work In C, which is a minimalist classic composition, 20th century work, in which performers essentially play through a musical score in which sections of the score, segments of the score, or these cells are looped continuously. And it can be played with any instrumentation, and it's played to a metronomic click. And the goal was, how do we build a virtual version, a virtual space that mirrors this path, moving through this musical path, which is how I always envisioned players performing this piece. So in collaboration with an artist named Chris Platts, who subsequently I've worked with up until last night when we were collaborating on a new piece also. So many year history working together. We designed kind of an abstract rendition of Terry Riley's work as a series of paths that virtual performers could move through. And as they moved through different segments of the path, their virtual instruments would be playing the musical content from the semantic musical score, and the parameterization of their motion, whether it's left or right, or up and down based on the contour of the path itself would control parameters of the musical instrument. In this case, the vertical position of a character moving around the path would control its amplitude. So the environment itself became a core component of the instrument that the performer was playing. So this concert was kind of a great experience. It was streamed between Milan and Stanford, California, with live performers in both spaces connected using software called Jacktrip, which is a low latency audio streaming platform, as well as performers in our gaming platform streamed again across the ocean. So here's a short excerpt of this performance. With is a combination of live sound being streamed across the ocean, synchronized to this metronome tempo. I'll let you in on a clue. The delay of the network connection was synced to that metronome, so that performers in both spaces were constantly playing on the right beat, but that beat was shifted 2 beats in either direction depending on which continent you were on. I'll let you guys think about that one for a second. Happy to talk more about it later. And the combination of these physical instruments, traditional instruments with virtual instruments was very interesting and was a real challenge to pull off. It was a lot of fun. This concept of hacking game engines was something that I've always enjoyed. I thought there's a humor and a joy to it, right? It's a fun concept. The last version I did of that, someone asked me if you could actually do this with Minecraft at one point. I said, I don't know, let's see. So during a trip to Beijing, I built something called OSC Craft, which was Minecraft hooked with open sound control inputs and outputs, and started experimenting with that a little bit just to prove that it could be done. It's a lot of fun. There's actually there's a link to the Git repo there. If anyone wants to pull it and update it, please be my guest. It's now 10 years old, which is hilarious as well. But a lot of fun.
Could we please drop it on the chat at some point? Maybe if you like after.
Sure. Happy to drop it afterwards. It's in the bottom left corner there of the image, but I'll put it in the chat as well. So so there was this history to hacking these game engines and converting them, things that were built for mindless enjoyment, into artistic platforms. And what I really realized what I was doing and what I was interested in was this concept of sonification, but procedural sonification and musical sonification. And for me, there's no better description of what a virtual space is and how data is represented in a virtual space than this classic scene from the movie The Matrix, which dates me a little bit. But in a classic scene, if you haven't seen the movie, I'll spoil it for you. The character Neo is the one. He's the chosen one, realizing that society is living within a construct, a virtual space. And at one point, he finally can see the construct. And what you see is this beautiful representation of data streaming. The walls are data, the characters are data, the avatars of the computer-generated AI characters that are hunting him are data. And so this idea of everything is data seemed like this world that I was exploring was already, something that I could tap into. And so I realized that I was super interested in how do you map these data streams of parameters, these data streams, the parameters of motion and action and gesture, how do you map those to sound and music in ways that are meaningful and coherent perceptually? One area that led me into, again, working with artist Chris Platts, was how could we build environments that characters would move through, that users would explore, that themselves were inherently musical? And what would that mean? How do we capture some of the concepts from the musical paradigms of rhythm and consistency and tempo and frequency and harmony, and how do we capture these ideas in the environment themselves? So that led to a work called Echo Canyon, which I'll just show a brief kind of fly-in sequence from this work. It was an interactive work built using the UDK, which was the Unreal Development Kit, which is the predecessor is Unreal 4 or Unreal 5. And sound was all done in Super Collider, again with open sound control, which I hacked into the UDK at that time, started to become a pattern. Sequence is interesting in that it shows off some of these topographies, and so these patterns that we created in the environment, these ridges that we just saw as we flew over, were actually supposed to be rhythms. As performers would fly their character past these, it would actually generate rhythmic beats as a ray trace was cast out from the side of their performer. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to just let this slow pan continue too much more, but when I started thinking about what was happening, and it was this idea of cross-modal interactions that we were composing as visual artists, as programmers, as musicians, we were trying to build kind of salient gestures that reached across these paradigms. One area that in this project in particular that I got really excited about was this idea of sonifying the actual physiology of a virtual character or an avatar. And in particular, I found lots of joy in this model, which was, this was our protagonist in this piece called Echo Canyon. I'll post a link to just a general YouTube channel where you can find these examples later. And in this case, I mapped the physical control of your character's wings to the two thumbsticks of an Xbox controller, so that as you moved them, you were actually using inverse kinematics, where there was an invisible sphere moving around that the wing was constantly reaching for. And if you move that sphere, then you could control the arms of this character. Now, that's fun and interesting in and of itself. But when you control sound using those actual bones of the character, you turn a bird into a theremin of sorts, which this brief example will show. The sound's probably a little low. So this was around the time I started to realize, again, this concept of everything is data was really malleable, in that the more you learn about these systems, these game engines, and the way that you construct spaces, characters, environments, you can really tap into that data in interesting ways. So here, this was a really simple model, tracking the coordinate position of bones in the skeletal mesh of this bird character and sending that data to Super Collider synthesizers. Two different instruments that we heard being used in that example, both very simple instruments, but a really interesting interaction in something that was fundamentally an instrument all of a sudden. It wasn't just a game with sound. It wasn't a procedural music system. This was really an instrument. And I like instruments. I play a lot of instruments. Instruments are fun. They're the foundation of how I interact with this thing we call music. And you know, again, just to kind of continue in the idea of ridiculousness and joy, for that same project, we also created an elephant-like creature that played music with its trunk that you would similarly control. And I did add a brief example of a concert I performed with a jazz quintet or a free improv quintet. In this case, that's Stefan Osterho on guitar and Henrik Frisk on saxophone. Although I think this is a duet between Henrik and myself. I'm playing the elephant. Sometimes those low frequencies don't come across Zoom, so again, the clips are online. So we moved into this space where I like many electronic musicians, have for a long time explored ways to create new kinds of sound in new paradigms that are separate fundamentally from traditional performance practices that we as musicians playing with physical instruments have grown up with. There was something that was always really interesting, is how do we do something different? And already I started to get this idea that building instruments themselves was fun and was challenging. It had these implicit questions and restrictions built into it that made you work more than just creating anything that your brain could come up with. You had to actually come up with solutions to existing issues. And while we weren't quite there yet in that, well, we'll get there in a second. The next phase of projects that I worked on had to do with building an instrument, but building an instrument that was collaborative inherently. And this was something that I got really interested in. How do we build not only a game space that people can interact with on a network level, but how do we build within that an instrument that is similar to a four-hands piano, or those great YouTube videos of an entire band playing on one guitar, right? Thumping around and plucking and that kind of interaction. How do you do that? How do you do that collaboratively? And so this led to a project called Carillon. Carillon is a bell tower. Bells have a great, wonderful history in electronic music and the synthesis of bells and how that those interesting timbres are created through these stacked partial harmonics that are generated in really interesting ways. And so again, artist Chris Platts and I sat down and started hacking around with this idea. How do we build a system that would be collaborative and musically challenging and interesting, and again, just fun? So Carillon became our first foray into VR as well. This was in the age of the Oculus Rift DK1, the first release of the Oculus headsets to the commercial public, running on computers that could barely handle them at the time. I heard Kathrin bemoaning kind of similar constraints in some of her early work. We definitely were hitting those walls here. Here's an example of Carillon in its first iteration, performed with the Stanford Laptop Orchestra, with two soloists playing in VR. And as we're getting set up in the video, I'll lead us in with this, is that building projects like this also led me to this interesting realization that in order to really showcase your work in virtual spaces, you have to really start to understand virtual cameras and framing and how the visual aspect of what you're playing and what you're conveying is shown to the audience. And so this borrows influences from film equally as well as gaming, in that the concepts of how do you frame your work becomes vitally important when you're not on stage holding a piece of wood with metal and string, right? So gesturally, in this case, the rings in the center of the carillon are themselves being sonified in real time, again, using a super collider engine, spatialized using ambisonics around a concert hall. The hand gestures of each performer can reach out and grab one of those rings, stop it, or spin it in any direction, which drives a synthesis engine. Kudos in this case to my colleague Go Wang, who's performing on the second machine, which was so incredibly slow that he almost fell over. The frame rates were so incredibly bad in the hardware that we were using at this point, but we made it. It was good fun. I think it's clear to. Sorry, go ahead.
Very briefly, that I find this set of work so fascinating because it is a very different way to think about embodiment. Before you mentioned, like, okay, holding a violin or holding a flute is very easy, so to say, to understand where the embodiment is. But when the instrument is an entire virtual world, it is not so easy or so intuitive to know how embodiment works within an instrument.
Exactly. And this concept of using virtual spaces, whether they're audio spaces or visual spaces or a combination of the two, to build something fantastical, to build a 9,000 foot string, right? You know, you can do that. We can build those models, and it's fascinating. And so kind of subverting this idea that we're within the instrument at this point, we're standing in the instrument playing it. In this clip, this is a version of me playing the instrument itself without the virtual reality, but using the same hand gestures, I think conveys a little bit of the control aspects of the instrument pretty well. And again, there's a lot more to that too. One thing I love to mention here, just for its historical importance, the actual bells being played in the piece the sounds are being driven by a model of a bell synthesized by Jean-Claude Rousset, famous electronic music researcher and composer. The actual motion of the bell arms and the striking of the plates sends the messages to over open sound control to the sound engine and pure data. And that's being driven by what's called a timeline within the game engine itself. So kind of co-opting this tool of the game engine programming environment into what became a score. So the musical score for the bells is actually written within the game engine. It's kind of a neat, fun thing that I hadn't done before. So this first foray into VR proved somewhat addictive and terrifying at the same time, but as technology started getting better and more affordable and more accessible, and computers started getting fast enough that we didn't feel so sick and didn't feel like falling over, I started thinking about what could we really do, and why weren't we building virtual instruments? Like why did it always have to be abstracted? And this was something personal to myself. I started thinking, people would ask me, why don't you build a real instrument? Which I always kind of laughed at and think, a real instrument, this is a real instrument. But then the more I thought about it, this idea started to become really appealing. And how do you model the complexities of these physical systems, similar to the way that we've learned how to model the acoustic properties of strings and blown tubes using models like Perry Cook and Gary Schiavone's wonderful synthesis toolkit code that lets you very easily build physical models. So I was commissioned to write a piece of music by the IEM in Graz, a project run by Marco Siciliani called the GAP Project. And it was game focused musical works. And he asked me, what do you want to do? What kind of piece would you write? And I said, I want to write a string quartet. I'm a composer. I should write a string quartet. And he kind of looked at me and said, oh, that's interesting. And I said, I'm going to build all the instruments myself. So this was this was in around 2018. And so my fundamental question that I was asking myself is, how can we translate traditional instrumental performance practices from their physical interactions, the set of physical interactions, into a virtual set that would be complementary and would somehow account for all that missing connection, that missing physicality. And the research question that came up was, can we actually build a system so that the tacit knowledge or learned behaviors of trained musicians can be leveraged, so that someone who is a better violinist or violist or cellist will be better at the virtual instrument than someone who's not, and vice versa. All of this brings up a question, meaning, what is virtuosity anymore, right? We can think of Paganini violinist playing Paganini on stage is a wonderful example of traditional Western virtuosity, but how does that translate into a digital future where anyone can hit a button and play millions of notes impeccably? So I took a stab at this. I composed a piece called Trois Machins de la Grasse Amant, which is itself a bad French pun. I'll leave that to anyone there to decipher. It's a kind of a franglais pun. And in doing so, I had to build a series of instruments, which I call quartet. Again, a bad pun. Let's see where. Okay, here we go. So quartet consists of the instruments you would find in a traditional string quartet, virtual implementations of them, cello, violin, viola. There's also a double bass that I've added subsequently, and an abstract instrument known as the orb, which is more like a bowed steel plate. Each one of them is, each instrument is the same instrument, just parameterized and scaled and stretched and changed dynamically in code in real time. That gives us a lot of flexibility. So the interactions that a performer takes by bowing on this bar rather than on the strings themselves, which virtually are very difficult to target, when the performer presses the different buttons on an Oculus controller, it depresses one finger at the location of the hand in real time. Here's an example of the client-server interactions. And when I say that the instrument is parameterized and is itself procedural, it's not a model. Each instrument is not a model. It's a series of components that are tied together in code and are arranged, rearranged, and reconfigured based on what instrument the performer wants to use at any given moment. The length of the string and the position of collision between the finger on that string procedurally generates sound using physical models of a bowed string. Again, in this case, taken from the synthesis toolkit that I mentioned before. So everything in here is procedurally generated, from the instrument to the sound. In order to compose for this instrument, I started exploring different ways to make it easier before making it hard. So I gave the possibility of changing the physics of the neck so that we could play it in different ways. We could add things like détentes or frets to make it easier for some performers, as well as playing it in its natural logarithmic scale. Again, the foundational technology here is open sound control, linking a virtual space and an audio engine. Here's a long list of parameters that are being streamed, at every game frame, from game engine to audio engine. And just a very simple, for this piece, a very simple processing chain to keep things clean and relatively instrument-like. So here's a short clip of performance. This was recorded at the Mummeth Hall in Graz. Again, thanks to the IEM for this project and for the funding that allowed this to take place. In the interest of time, I'll just, share that video link at the end. Performers are working from a visual score that they learned and practiced on ahead of time, in this case with the composer, which would be me, wherein we explored different characteristics of the instrument in a series of different movements of the work. The entire piece ends up usually being around 40 minutes long. And it's a challenge to pull off. And since it is so complex, the last thing that I'll show here is just that in recent last few years, I've taken to play a solo piece called Elegy Set Ready Set Rapture that I composed using some new features of the instrument for double bass. So I think we're about out of time, so I don't want to go on for too long. As I mentioned, I think that there's all kinds of neat things that you can do with these kind of systems that, well, there's still a lot to be done, and it's been a fascinating turn in this arc of work to kind of start embracing the challenges of building and recreating, but extending traditional instrumental design and performance practices in ways that are musically idiomatic, but that leverage the power of these game systems. So I think that's kind of where I've ended up at this point. And I think that's probably a good place to bring it to a close for this portion of the talk. So
thank you so
all.
much, Rob.
Thank you. Amazing.
Incredible. I watched briefly beforehand the performance with the double bass, and it's so striking to see the resistance of the body happening where there is none, so to say, none in the physical world, but yes, in the way that the instrument is embodied. And that is very, very inspiring to see.
Thank you.
Yes, so then, Kathrin, are you still there? Then we would maybe, hi. So very fascinating to see that you both work with rather similar tool sets, but also the output is so different, and that is fascinating. We already have 2 questions from the Q&A section. I would, and another one,
Please keep sending your question.
Yes. So I would read the first one by our colleague Tansi Xiao, also a visual artist. A question for Kathrin. Could you tell us again the Austrian artist residency that you did and share some other residency programs in Europe that suit artists who work in the intersection of technology, sound, and media arts? Thank you.
Yes, of course. So what the residency, what I did was the Q21 Museumsquartier. I don't know how to say that in English. I think there's no translation. It's a name in Vienna. So, and they have different kind of residencies. Sometimes there's an open call. I was invited. Then the other one is was more specific, is the residency, what Rob as well. I did the same residency, I think, or maybe in another area, was in Graz, also in Austria. Always going to Austria. But so in Berlin, there are so many. So there also in Spain, there's this, sometimes they are really Europe focused, but you really have to look, there's this IFA center. So they are really looking for people, they're coming from outside and want to do exhibitions or something here. So maybe this is a contact, and maybe they have more contacts. So there's a lot of, so maybe Tobias, maybe I sent you with some time to your colleague list, if I have some infos together, because I always see them and I said, oh yeah, it's not for me, but maybe for someone else. Yeah.
Thank you. That would be great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Then a next question by composer and Professor Dagiers for either Kathrin or Rob to consider. One recurring issue in interactive art has been how to translate live input information from the user or performer to reactions of the artwork or musical instrument. Do you have any comments about these topics?
I have a few. Hi, Doug. Nice to not see you. It would be nice to see you. Thanks for the question. So I thought about this a lot in this concept of mapping, because we're constantly mapping data streams from one paradigm where they mean something to another where they may not. And where I settled, and this actually is what I kind of buried my head in when I wrote my dissertation, was the concept of perceptual coherence, in that how do we measure when two things that really have no equality or no way of measuring their equality, how can we compare them or contrast them even? And so the idea of whether something is perceptually coherent, whether a gesture in one space, in one paradigm, pairs well with another, is kind of the human easy way to think about it. Whether these gestures are perceptually coherent when you overlay their spaces together, was actually itself the subject of my dissertation. I won't say that I solved any issues, but the questions came up a lot in that and so what I did was I conducted these massive user studies where I generated hundreds of videos of avatar motion and sonified them all in real time, and asked users to do what's called a pairwise statistical comparison. So judge which of these two examples feels better, looks, I forget the verbiage I used exactly, but the concept was which one is more perceptually coherent. And the idea was, we can judge whether, if an increase in frequency is mapped to an increase in speed, or an increase in frequency is mapped to motion on one axis versus a different one. And by showing many different sonifications to study participants, my hope was I could see patterns that might emerge from that. And there were some interesting findings, but nothing that I kind of generalized as well. But so when I think about how you bring together these disparate paradigms, I think in this concept of coherence. Is this gesture artistically coherent in one space and similarly coherent in another? When I'm acting as an artist, that final judgment is on me. It's not on the user. So, I mean, I am the user. It's not on the audience so much because that's what I'm projecting forward. As a researcher, I'm interested to know what the audience thinks, but that's a whole different world in a sense, right? So that's a great question. Yeah.
Kathrin, any comment from your side?
If I understand that correct, the question.
Shall I read it again?
Yeah, it's about the interaction from a user from outside, a visitor, for example, or a viewer that he interact. If I understand, that was the question.
Right.
So,
the recurring issue in interactive art has been how to translate live input information from user performer directions of the artwork or musical instruments. So basically the input data, how to map the input data.
yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I have to think about that. But if the thing is, and I think Rob said that in the end, so I didn't get input. I know there are some performance I didn't do on my own. Mobile. So this is where the viewer or the visitor of a performance has also influence from outside. Yeah. So, and I also thought about like in the gaming thing that the participation of that are not only that someone else is manipulating as well the sound, so it makes more exciting at one point that I use QR codes and the visitors can catch them, and then I take this data and movement and maybe some of these kind of ideas. So it's a bit complicated. I think the solution is OSC, of course, or something. And yeah, this kind of, it's interesting because I have some performances where it was also in Austria with Thomas Grill and the other nice guy, Till Boverman. So they were connected and they playing their sound instruments and manipulating in real time my stuff. But I really have to, because I'm flying in real time, I have to really to fight because sometimes they're playing really hard. So I couldn't control that really, only that I said, okay, I stop them now. So this is the only thing what I could do. But it's just an interesting question and I really have to think a bit more about that. But thank you.
Thank you. We have another question from an anonymous attendee. It's a question for Rob. Rob, your talk about marrying physical and virtual spaces. Does audience participation figure in your performances, of your work, or does it remain largely virtual?
Great question. Audience participation is tricky. And with technology, it is incredibly tricky. For the most part, in these kind of works, I have not yet involved the audience as an active participant in the pieces. There's this lingering goal that VR, for instance, would become so ubiquitous that at a concert performance or at an art gallery, people would just pull out their headset and would be able to just engage the work. Conceptually, we can do that, right? We can, these game engines that I'm using are all networked in multiplayer. So characters can log in. Making it so that someone off the street can just engage it is itself a very significant challenge often. Dealing with unknown network connections, unknown hardware, the distraction of someone dealing with these devices. I worked a lot with mobile phone music softwares, both as a graduate student working with Goong and also at the company Smule that we had that built mobile musical instruments. And this idea of the handshake, of how do you get a phone to connect into your system in the concert hall, for instance, when as soon as they walk through the door, you realize the users aren't on the network anymore because the hall is made of lead, right? And they're not able to easily engage with your work. You have to do a lot of extra work to bring them into your space with their technology device. The hope is there, but no, I have not put significant time into that yet, in that I just don't, we're not at that stage yet with VR. One day we will be, I'm sure of it, right? But it comes down to VR or AR headsets, XR headsets being this at a maximum, right? And we're all naturally connected without effort. Maybe the new natural language processing APIs will make it easy to walk in and say, chat, whatever you want to call it, connect me to the system, right? But we're not there yet. So it's a great question and it's a great paradigm. It's just tricky.
And I would say that one aspect of a lot of VR and AR music performances, as far as I've seen, there is this feeling of wanting to have audience participation, in the sense that there is usually a screen projecting what the performers are seeing, which is a kind of a new paradigm for music. It is not that when you go to a concert to listen to a symphony orchestra or a contemporary music ensemble, you're not seeing what the performer is seeing. But once you have these virtual worlds, then it becomes also compelling to share that with the audience, even if it's not in the actual virtual space. You can have that experience.
We have two more questions. There was a comment, Rob, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, it brings up all kinds of issues that while you can solve them with technology, like in that last example I showed, I actually used two screens. I use one screen to show what I'm seeing to the audience and one to show a global view of the virtual space. But there's an equally interesting discussion around, is it even necessary? Should I be able to play that instrument in the darkness on stage? I'm using my body, but so at what point is it just kind of technological cool thing to show? And at what point is it fundamentally necessary? And I actually had this debate a lot in the design and development of that last quartet project with my colleagues in Graz. It was super fun and fascinating, but yeah, tempers raise over that issue, actually.
Potentially even both, yeah.
Yeah.
That we have both. Another question by Safia to Jakuba. Thanks for sharing such impressive work. My question is, what do you think are the benefits of such creative digital work on the human brain? And also, what are its disadvantages? Who wants to chime in?
Yeah. So the thing is that I see it in, so I'm criticizing VR as well. So in one point, otherwise I also see in other way good things in that, because it's another world and you feel everyone knows the winter depression. So, and then you, in this dark time, so if you put on the VR glasses and you see a bright 4K, 8K maybe now, so area, you feel automatically really nice. Yeah, so it's giving something to you. Yeah. But the other things are, so there are so many different kind of systems. Maybe you know all Mozilla Hubs, for example. So I worked for my students. I thought I'd do something nice, and I bring them, because of the lockdown situation, I put the PDF in 3D. And I worked really roughly many days on Mozilla Hubs, and it's crashed a lot of times. And sorry. And the thing is that I was sitting so intense in front that I'm get first time ever motion sickness from that. And I wish no one that. So this is something where we as humans are not really, you know, these examples with living 24 hours in VR world and so on. But there are so many other things, what I say, especially for disabled persons, they can meet each other in a different kind of way, especially for people, they can ride, they can't move their bodies anymore, but they have there another kind of world. So there are really different kinds. I don't know how they mentioned that, if they get motion sickness. So I didn't know anything about that. But I had this kind of motion sickness, was really weird because you have always this flickering, even if you look to a screen after days. So it was quite heavy. So, and I think it's both. I think the body is not really ready for that. If you're thinking about this metaverse living, so this is I can't really say that that's good, that's bad. I think it's something in between, and you have to take care about your body and your own, because everyone is individual, and someone can live 24 hours there. I'm not. So, yeah.
Yeah, and also the way we are sensitized or desensitized for the ping of reactive systems, let it be VR or just any remote control situation where there is any sort of ping, and we experience that ping, and it is changing how we interact generally with all sorts of digital interfaces. And in the long run, there will certainly be some implications for the brain, but also very difficult to pin that down or to track that.
Also, the fact that these questions raise a larger issue, which is accessibility, and things that we did not think about before become very critical in how to make artworks accessible to a larger audience. And yeah, great question. So we have our last question, and it's from a very special person, Helen Ko. She's the director of Art Science Connect. So we also want to say thank you for making this possible. And her question is for Rob Hamilton. Rob, can you talk about the reaction of the musicians to your virtual instruments? Does it have any influence on creativity or technique?
Great question. So I've been blessed, at least in the arc of these projects that I described and showed today, in that the artists, the musicians who I was collaborating with at first, that group predominantly is very comfortable with technology. And the idea of electroacoustic performance was something that they had always been used to. So in those explorations where I made Poor Henrik duet with an elephant, and I made a series of performers play the Terry Riley piece with this insane setup. They were already well bought into the concept that electronic sounds marry with traditional physical acoustic instruments in really interesting ways, and they were ready to engage that. The string quartet was perhaps my first experience with performers who were not from that world. So in each performance of that work, I've sought out literal string quartets, groups of who are trained to play together their instruments that they put thousands and thousands of hours into, that they're incredibly comfortable with, and as such can tackle things like a graphic score with ease. It's something they're very comfortable with. Putting those people into an incredibly awkward situation and telling them to then behave professionally and project themselves as musicians to an audience in ways that they're not comfortable with is a really eye-opening experience for any composer, in that you're asking people to do things that is, even if they're willing, is generally outside of their comfort level and is really not fair in some ways, in that given 5 days of rehearsal, which sounds like a lot for an electronic musician, that's nowhere near enough time for someone to master an instrument and then get up on stage and say, look at me, I'm playing this thing. So I've always tried to embrace the fun and the novel aspects of these systems, working with performers like that who are incredible musicians, but at the same time are being put in an incredibly awkward situation. And in every ensemble I've played with has worked diligently and incredibly hard, with grace and dignity and beautiful results. But it's very hard. It takes a lot of work. And so in sitting through rehearsals for every performance of that string quartet, I made many, many, many notes and changed things as quickly as I could to account for issues that came up that I perhaps had overlooked because up until then, I had been the world expert performer on the quartet instrument, and handing that off to people who were supposed to be better instantly showed me things that I took for granted that I understood as the designer and developer that they shouldn't have to. And so it's a challenge. It's a real challenge, trying to do justice to performers like that with your work when you can make shortcuts for yourself. And this is something that a lot of electronic musicians run into. And we are the world's greatest virtuoso on the instrument that we created that no one else has ever played. As soon as you hand that off to the world, the challenges multiply exponentially. So it's a really great question.
Thank you. It's really inspiring, and I've heard one reason why I'm so interested in like newly developed instruments is because this idea of virtuosity is starting to shift from something that you should master over a very long period of time to something that, okay, I am this element in a larger system and I need to find my way through it. And I think that is a very interesting change also artistically that can be applied to other areas besides music. Okay, so
yes, so much more to learn, and thanks to you two and all the participants online. And yeah, I hope to see you on April 15th for the second event with polytempo composition. Yeah, wish you all a good weekend.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and we look forward to keep in touch and see and hear more of your work. Thank you everyone who joined us. Have a very nice weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.